Hello and a very warm welcome back to the Team JLX podcast. Before we kick off the podcast today, I've got some exciting news. We are going to be releasing something at the end of this month. I cannot tell you what it is yet, obviously, because it's a secret and we've got a lot of work to put in before we get that final thing put together. But it's super excited. I'm super excited to show and deliver it to you. I'm trying not to give away exactly what it is, but it's going to be great. I think it's going to appeal to a lot of people. It's going to solve the key problem that the majority of people I've been speaking to have been challenged with lately, and I'm not going to say any more because I'm definitely going to give away what we're doing. But keep your eyes peeled. Obviously, if you're a regular podcast listener, you're going to be kept in the loop with it anyway, but if you're not, then it's certainly something which you will want to keep up to date with. So either keep up to date with the podcast, obviously a good idea, or just follow our social channels because it will be on there as well. In today's Q&A, we are going to be attacking some more questions from our clients with regards to training. So we had some great questions this week, and we're going to answer 3 questions from Pauline. Pauline's asked 3 questions that link together almost perfectly, whether she realized she was doing it or not. She's asked 3 wonderful questions. So the first question is, how important is volume? The second question is, how much volume is too much volume? And is recovery really important? And, how do you detect that overtraining element? These are 3 great questions, and they actually all link together, like I said, whether she realized that or not at the time. So volume is very, very important, and it makes up the equation that essentially drives muscle growth. So you have an equation known as VIF, V-I-F, volume, intensity, frequency. Volume, there's an argument that's been going on for many, many years how to calculate volume. Many people said it's kilos. Many people said it's hard working sets. There's so many different things. Personally, by my view of the literature and the reading that I've done around this, I am much more a fan of high intensity sets. So if you were to say, okay, Xander, what's the difference between a high intensity set and a set? Well, if you are training at optimal volume, but your intensity within the sets that you're using is just not good enough. Let's just say you're training to RIR 5, you're kind of going and your first rep looks like your last rep and so on and so forth. That is not going to be driving muscle growth, okay? It's not enough just to do the set. The set has to be at a certain intensity for it to qualify. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. It's a bit like being at work. You don't get paid to be at work. You get paid to go to work and do the job that you were supposed to go and do, right? So if you don't do a good enough job, in theory, you wouldn't get paid. So volume is very important, and that is what I would class as sets of high intensity work per week. Then you have, just to clarify that, it's per muscle group, by the way. So you would do X amount of sets per glutes, X amount of sets per biceps, blah, 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 blah. I'll go into a bit more detail in that in a second. So you got volume, you got intensity. So I've kind of touched a bit on intensity already, but intensity obviously is how hard we're working. And we tend to use proximity to failure as our metric, because what we know is that muscles tend to grow far better when they are pushed far more. So typically, you're going to want to work somewhere between 3 and 0 RIR, which is reps in reserve. So if you were 0 RIR, that means you've just gone straight to failure. There's nothing left. You couldn't have done one more rep. 3 means you've left 3 in the tank. But that's really quite hard training. People underestimate how hard 3IR is because they go to what they think is right, but what they're actually capable of is 2 very, very different things. And then you have frequency. So frequency is basically how many exposures the muscle gets to work per week. So if you just do an old style bodybuilding split and you train, let's say, glutes 1 day per week versus somebody who trains glutes 3 days per week, typically the person who's going to train glutes 3 days a week is going to be able to grow muscle a lot quicker, a lot more efficiently. And I would argue in a much more enjoyable way as well, because you're not loading just a killer amount of volume into one session. And that's actually another discussion for another day. We won't go into that now because I could go down a whole podcast route on the effectiveness of different training strategies. So is volume important? Absolutely. It's very, very important. Now, the next question is, how much volume is too much volume? So she's kind of put in brackets here, is it going to help me to grow my glutes if I go wild on them 5 days a week? So the kind of the age-old adage here is you can grow from what you can recover from. So if you cannot recover from something, And metrics of this would be, fatigue, systemic, so like I'm just absolutely exhausted. You got DOMS, so delayed onset muscle soreness, the soreness you get in your muscles after working out. And then you've got projection of progress. So if you're on a nice trajectory, you're making good progress week to week, good. If you're not making any and you're just consistently feeling beaten up, that's probably a good indication that you shouldn't be doing that. Now, my recommendation based on the literature would be training big muscle groups, so say your quads, your hamstrings and your glutes, 2 to 3 times per week with a what I would call an equated volume structure, which basically means we're not going to go super hard on one day, because if you say went and did 12 sets on Monday, if you train glutes again on Wednesday, chances are your glutes are still going to be quite sore, so you're not going to be able to facilitate the same level of output. Right, you're going to be hindered as a result of that. So it's really important to look at it. And the reason I like to equate volume is for example, if a client had 18 sets of glutes per week, which is a lot of sets, that's a lot of sets of work to do, then I would split them out 6, 6 and 6. And I would choose different exercises on those days to facilitate a more enjoyable session. So for example, I wouldn't just do 6 sets of hip thrusts on one day. I would choose 2 exercises. So we may do hip thrusts and we may do kickbacks. And the reason for that is that the hip thrust is a not only heavier, it's a shortening exercise, so the glutes contract, and that's where if you look at how the hips are extending, you're going to get a lot more shortening of the glutes, and therefore it's called a shortening exercise. But when you do a kickback, you still get the shortening of the glutes, but you're not going through extension in the same way, and you're going to work a slightly different portion of the glutes. So the exercises are slightly different, and they're very, very different in terms of their anatomy use, but very different in also the levels of fatigue. So they balance each other out really nicely. The kind of metric of like, should you train glutes 5 days a week? If you can train glutes 5 days a week, my argument would be that you're probably not training them intensely enough, or you're dividing the volumes up too much. And so what you're going to lack is that on one day you might do 3 sets. So if you divided up my 18 sets between 5, you'd get 3 sets a day. The thing you'd miss out on is that generating muscle pump. So you would not be getting the metabolites. So we do know that metabolites is a good way to grow muscle. So you have to think like, yeah, I could train glutes 5 days a week, but is that optimal? Is that really going to help me? In my opinion, no. I genuinely do not believe that training 5 days a week glutes would be an effective way to grow that muscle. I do think that doing them 3 days a week with optimal volumes equated through the week is probably perfect. Not only just for your recovery, but also for the fact that you're going to be able to train with more intensity in those times, and therefore combine that with more recovery, you're far more likely to be able to get more muscle growth and more recovery as well. You don't want to walk around not being able to sit down properly all week, right? It's not really my idea of fun. So the next question then, so we've got how important is volume, how much is too much volume. So with the volume question, how much is too much? Everybody's going to have a very different level of volume that they are able to manage. It's not the case that I say, right, everyone just do 18 sets. It's just not true. Like, there's so many factors: training age, experience, whether you are somebody who's very, very strong and can lift a lot, or whether you are somebody who's hyper responsive and doesn't need to lift a lot. Like, there are so many questions that I would need to find out. So what I would say is the best thing to do is to start working at around 12 sets per week, because that's usually around the minimum effective volume needed for glutes to start growing. But it would go all the way up to about 20. But it depends on the exercises you're using. So if you're using a lot of heavy hip thrust work, you might struggle to get past 16. But if you're using more of a variety of exercises, like I suggested you should do earlier, you should be able to get in 18 sets quite comfortably. And then, of course, you would kind of split them up. Now, there are differences that I've acknowledged between males and females. Typically, I believe that females are able to handle a lot more volume at higher intensities than males. Off the back of nearly 10 years of working with women, I can see how much more volume they're able to handle and how much better they recover typically. So with that in mind, if you're training with your boyfriend or your husband or whoever, just a friend, then you might be like, well, they're only doing 3 sets, so maybe I'll just do 3 sets. But what if you needed 5? So do bear in mind that there are differences. There are clear differences between males and females, and there'll be clear differences between females and females. So it's really a good idea to go and find out what your training capacities are through the week, and to be able to optimize that, because if you can do that, you're going to be growing muscle so much faster and recovering so much better. This is something we do within our team. So we set minimal volumes for every muscle group, and then we increase them as blocks go, so that we can start to find where those optimals are. And there are many ways that we would look at within those training structures, with our clients' feedback, with their training numbers, things like that, to be able to know exactly whether they are training optimally, and we're like, yeah, we're in a sweet spot now, let's keep pushing this, or we need to push them a bit harder, we'll add a bit more work, or they need a little bit less. And there does come times like you push clients and push them, and then you'll be like, right, we're clearly not recovering from this, let's lower it back down. And that's the glorious thing about being able to work with people who take their training very seriously, and enjoy learning about it and enjoy pushing that a bit further, because that extra bit of knowledge and that extra bit of one-to-one support is crucial in optimizing a process. And people think, oh, I can't be asked to put all that work in, but when you think about it, you're putting in a bit more work to get a result that's 10 times what you're getting. And I think if you said to anyone, if you give me £1, I'll give you 10 back, most people will be like, yeah, I'll give you £1. So you have to think of it not necessarily in the short term, but like, what am I set to gain when I am far more efficient with my training and I'm getting so much better results? And everyone feels better when they get results, right? I think nobody likes not getting results, which is a pretty important part of this process for sure. And then we're talking about recovery. So is recovery really important? How to detect overtraining? How do I know my body needs to rest? So we look at a lot of biometric measures. So we'll look at muscle soreness. We'll look at motivation, enjoyment of training. That's a really big one, by the way. Lots of people think, oh, you're not always going to be motivated. But if you are typically somebody who's really enjoying training and you really love that process, and then all of a sudden you're sore as hell, you're really tired, and you are just not motivated and not enjoying your training, that could be a really, really, really clear sign that you need to deload, that you need to have a quick break, take the foot off the gas for a week, restock the shelves if you like, and then push on. And to be honest with you, when you get to that level of fatigue and that level of soreness and that level of continued hindered recovery, you're increasing your chances of training. So the way I see it, and the way I kind of chat to our team about this, is you've got 2 options. You take a cool off week, which is basically a deload. It's not a week off. It's just a week where we do a little less intense training with a slight less amount of volume. We just take it down a notch. Good both psychologically and physiologically. Or you increase your chances of training injuries, which is going to lead to you not being able to train at all. So, if you asked anyone with a reasonable state of mind, which one would you rather? Everyone's going to be like, I'll just take my foot off the gas for a week. And a lot of people, when they come to us originally, they hate the idea. I don't want to deload. I don't want to do this, like, horrible idea. But actually, they learn to love them, because what it means is they can really push themselves before that week of deload, training to failure, hitting multiple PRs, gnarly pumps, feeling really strong in the gym. They're able to do all of those things, which means that when they take that week off, it's like, oh, yes, that was a really great block, kind of draw a line in the sand, and we're going to build again, we're going to go again, and we're going to really kind of give it some. So there are so many positives to deloading, and there are so many signs that we measure on a weekly basis with all of our clients to make sure that they aren't close to that. We do structure deloads into blocks, but we also do move them. So if somebody isn't ready to deload, we push it back. If somebody's overcooked the start of their block, we might just bring the deload forward a week. But typically our deloads are set in what an optimal structure would be, and it works really well for the majority of people. And for those we know a bit better that suits a longer block or a short block, then we change those things up. And that's, again, one of the benefits of that. So, is recovery really important? 100%. Recovery is so important. And what's interesting about recovery is, a couple of years ago, people started the notion that you needed to be doing recovery runs and recovery walks and this kind of stuff. It's completely illogical for most of the ways that people do this. It would be a bit like saying, I'm really tired from work, I'm going to do more work. Like, What do you do when you get really tired? You book a holiday, you book some time off. Same thing with the gym. If we're feeling really tired, we're feeling really fatigued and things like that, we would book in a deload, right? Or on a very lower level scale of like, oh, this week I'm feeling really kind of beaten up by training, we need more recovery. That doesn't mean we need to go and do more training. It means we need to go and manage that better. So sleep, the best aid of recovery you'll ever have. Hydration, nutrition. Lots of people save all their calories for the evening when they're about to go to sleep. How about stacking a lot of those calories in and around your training session when your body really needs it? Let's support the training and recovery process with that. If you do not recover well, not only do you limit the ability that you have to get better results, but you're crushing your ability to actually enjoy the process, which in the circle of this means that you're limiting your ability to get better results. So training enjoyment, I think, comes from the ability to push and make results, but also not being absolutely crippled afterwards for 3 days because you don't want to go back and train. You don't want to get out of bed, and it limits your capabilities to do your steps, to do all the things that you need to do around that. And training starts to become a hindrance to your life then. And realistically, nobody wants that. So it's really important, I think, the training enjoyment factor of things, and that comes from being able to recover well and being able, therefore, to perform and keep on making progress. I will add this, and this is why I joined the recovery question in. Most people will focus on what they can do to recover better, not what they did in the first place that meant that they needed that level of recovery. This is really important. Recovery is the aftermath of what you have already done. So if you keep needing to recover more, the chances are what you are doing that's leading to that need for recovery is what needs adapting. That is where you would look at that VIF equation we spoke about earlier. Is my volume too much? Is my intensity a little bit too high? Is my frequency too high? You would look to adjust that because, don't get me wrong, if you're in your first week of training and you get a load of soreness, that's very normal. Muscles respond really well to novelty. First week of training, very novel, therefore lots of soreness. But if you are in your third week of training, fourth week of training, and that soreness just hasn't dropped off, the thing you've really got to ask yourself then is my recovery just shit? Or do I need to adjust my training? Do I need to lower that down? Because clearly that's the thing that's really holding me back here. And that's sometimes a difficult reality to face because a lot of people are like, oh, I want to be hardcore and I want to train loads. But think of it like this. If you're getting great results training less, that's less time in the gym. That's more efficient workouts. That's less energy required. And that's much better recovery to get a better result. Transfer that over into work. If somebody said work less, put less effort in, generally be there less hours, and you get a great result, you'd be thinking, yeah, bite your hand off. So we have to think of these things in a more logical manner that allows us to make more logical based decisions. And I understand completely how difficult that can be sometimes. So, it's often the thing where people go, right, I need to take more protein, I need to take creatine, like what supplements can I take? But in reality, those supplements are going to help you 1% versus changing that VIF equation a little bit, which will help you probably 70%. The other 30% would be your recovery levels and things like that. So to kind of round off this kind of short podcast here on kind of volume, the importance of that alongside recovery and training, it is super important. Volume is super important. The key points for me would be to learn your own levels of volume requirement. So remember that things like deltoids, things like your calves, things like the smaller muscles, they will require so much more volume. They will recover so much better. And those you can probably train 4-5 times a week easily. You could train your deltoids 5 times a week, no problem. If you are looking at glutes though, you probably want to max that out at 2 to 3 times per week because you're not going to have the level of recovery required to then put the effort in the next day to be able to then, amp up the training in order to get recovery, in order to get the growth. So, training, recovery, growth. If you can't recover, you can't get the growth. So if we're just hammering a muscle into the ground, we're not going to get the thing we actually came to achieve. And that's obviously super important. So I would say that most people who are struggling at the moment probably just doing 3 sets all the way through their programs. Now, there are times where you certainly do need 4 sets of things. Sometimes you can even push to 5, or you can add an exercise, quite a nuanced way of doing it. But I would say typically that for most people, if you're just always doing 3 sets, the first thing I would do is increase the level of intensity, because most of you are able to do that, whether you realize it or not. And then I would start to increase the volume. I would do it in like week 3, and I would increase from there. We obviously measure all of our clients on a week-to-week basis, so we take care of all of that for them, take out the guesswork, increase the rate of return of their result. But it's certainly something you could do for yourself as well. If this is something you struggle with, as always, we are absolutely more than happy to help you with this, and we'd love to chat through some training bits and obviously optimize that for you. So if there's anything that you are unsure of, or you would like a bit of extra support with your goals, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to help you. You can drop me a message on Instagram _Xander_JLX, or you can comment below and we can touch base there. It would be an absolute pleasure. You know, we thrive our clients with training. It's our favorite thing for sure. And obviously working with people who love training is an absolutely, it's a wonderful thing, you know, and you can meet someone who's as passionate about training and really working out hard. It's, I think it's something which, in a world where everyone focuses on nutrition and everyone focuses on food and good and bad, it's really refreshing. And equally, I would argue, the best way of getting results as well. Folks, a pleasure as always. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you real soon. All the best. Bye for now.